Hey there berries, welcome to another one of my league support guides. We've done a lot of different champions already, such as Swain and Zyra and Nami and so many other support champions. You should go check them out if you're also considering playing any other champions. Plus, if you want to be up to date on what is in the meta for solo queue, we do bi-weekly tier lists. We're on patch 10.16 at the moment, and I did a 10.16 tier list which is on the channel as well. Go have a look on the main front page of the channel and have a look at the support guide content area. This guide here though is for Blitzcrank. We haven't done a Blitzcrank guide yet. The overall basis of Blitzcrank is fairly simple. It's a very basic champion to understand. I think the majority of players in their league player base, once they see Blitzcrank, you kind of get the idea of what he's going to do anyway. But this video is going to guide you if you're new to playing League or first time playing Blitzcrank or wanting to start playing Blitzcrank. I can push you in the right direction in terms of what runes and what items you should be looking at, and some little tips maybe in terms of how to play out particularly the laning phase. So as you can see on the screen already, here are the runes that you should be taking in the overwhelming majority of your games. You've got Aftershock there, that will proc off your grab, your Q, and your knock up your E. We'll go into all the spells later on in the video. Now you go into the secondary and the resolve tree. Demolish is pretty key for a lot of the high health champions, as it enables you to do a lot of damage to the turrets, which is particularly important at the start of the game because you can get extra gold from doing more damage to the turrets early on. So Demolish is a really nice rune for this one, as Blitzcrank is basically quite a high health tank. Otherwise, you could do Font of Life, but the effective healing from Font of Life, that rune in particular, is kind of bad. I personally take Demolish 100% of my games. Now this next rune here on the resolve tree is kind of interesting because it kind of depends on what you're playing against in the laning phase. If you're getting poked a lot, Second Wind can give you a decent amount of healing back. If you don't think there's going to be a lot happening in the laning phase, conditioning can make it so that the early part of the game doesn't really matter, then you become much tankier mid-game onwards. But Blitzcrank should be looking to be quite active from basically the get-go. Bone plating makes it so you block a decent amount of damage from those engages that you'd be consistently looking for. So bone plating is the preference here overall. Overgrowth at the moment is on the last one. The resolve tree is the strongest. Revitalize would affect your passive shield, but is a big no-no here anyway. Unflinching is okay. It would affect your W, your speed up, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But on the whole, I think your bonus HP on Overgrowth is pretty good. It scales a little bit onto your Demolished as well. Just makes you overall pretty tanky. Unflinching is good if there's a lot of crowd control on the enemy team, but Blitzcrank is the one usually starting up the fight. Then after that, he doesn't do a great deal of things. So once you've already done your big move, everything else is kind of just whatever really. So unflinching is on overall not as worth as Overgrowth, as most of the time you'll be like more of a beefy roadblock more than anything to help block skill shots and things. Secondary on the inspiration tree, I really like Hexflash. If you guys don't know how to use that, I'll show that later on into the video. But Hexflash means that when your flash is on cooldown, and when you're out of combat for 10 seconds, you can stay in a brush, you can cast it, hold down the button down where your flash would be, and then you will pop out of the brush, and it will basically act like a flash in itself, and then you can get the element of surprise on the enemy, as long as they don't have a ward in the brush that you're doing that from. The inspiration secondary here, Biscuits I like a lot. It works with your passive, it gives you much needed sustain in the lane. If for whatever reason you feel like that can't happen, then Cosmic Insight is an okay option too. Gives you a little bit more cooldown overall throughout the entire game. But also Mini Dematerializer works quite nicely if you feel like you're not able to get any cannon minions in lane. So that's usually in lanes where there could be another tank on the enemy team and like another hard engage, and you're not doing very well in the lane. Mini Dematerializer can make it so that it can at least secure you 3 cannon minions for you and your AD carry. Against double poke, once again, if you're having a tough time and you're not able to make grabs, Mini Dematerializer can be a function to help you not lose too much money in the game. But it's basically like a losing rune, as opposed to if you take Mini Dematerializer, you're basically saying, my pick was bad. You probably messed up in champion selection, honestly, if you're having to go Mini Dematerializer in solo queue. So yeah, I'll talk about a little bit of when to start picking Blitzcrank, when you do pick Blitzcrank and when you don't pick Blitzcrank, after we sort out these runes and things. So on these stat runes here at the bottom, there's lots of different options you can do down here. You could play a really aggressive Blitzcrank. You could go like double Adaptive Force, and that will give you a very nice little extra damage spike on the very early game for sure. As the game goes on and as laning phase is kind of over, this Adaptive Force will be completely wasted. I personally like going cooldown reduction on the first one, and then just taking magic resistance and then armor through. I think having a little bit of extra damage spike early usually doesn't make much of a difference, whereas having the extra magic resistance to be able to stay in longer to do another engage, or to have higher cooldown reduction mid-game onwards, it is generally, for me, more important. But there is no wrong choice here. It just depends on how aggressive you feel, and that you'll be able to play in that laning phase. If you feel like you can go really aggro straight from level 2, then maybe the double Adaptive Force would be better for you. But just something to think about there when you're going into a lane matchup is switching up these stat runes is pretty important. And if you're playing against like a double AP or double AD, then make sure you switch into double armor or double magic resistance. There's a lot of players forget to do that when, you know, they're not too sure what they're playing against, or like people get caught off a little bit from playing against double AP and then forget to change their runes. So just something for you to factor in there when you're in your solo queue games. What we're going to do now is we're going to head over into the practice tool. While we do that, I'm going to be talking about summoners a little bit more. We've already covered Hexflash a little bit, but what you can do is you can also take Ignite if you wish. I usually run Ignite most of the time when I'm playing Blitzcrank. There is a case to go Exhaust. You could take Exhaust if you wish, in order to prevent assassins from getting to your backline. But Ignite is usually the primary choice because Blitzcrank is a very early game champion, and you want to kind of get those kills in early and then carry your team by making individual picks and just killing one person off, and then it's an easy 4v5, 5v4 matchup. Hopefully that makes sense. So because you've got Flash, I'll showcase that now because we're still talking about the summoners. So once my Flash comes off cooldown, and once we get into game, I can show you how to use Hextech Flash. So once your Flash is on cooldown, like now, you'll have to wait 20 seconds in order for it to then be ready. If you get hit by an enemy champion, or I think it includes minions and things, then you'll have to wait another 10 seconds in order to use this. This is like, it's very similar to like mobility boots. Where as soon as you're out of combat, you get the extra movement speed. Here you're not allowed to use Hexflash if you get hit by an enemy champion. So if we teleport down to bot side, so usually what the kind of play is here, so you've already used your Flash. If you hold down the button that you've assigned to your Flash, hold it down in the direction you want to go, let go, and then usually it's a play off that. We'll talk about the abilities a little bit more. But that's how Hextech Flash works, and I use that a lot on other hard engaged champions like Leona, and the other hook champions as well, like Thresh and Nautilus. I'll showcase that one more time. There's no way for me to spam this in the practice tool because if I put reset cooldowns, it will make it so that I've got flash ready. So this is the only way, unfortunately, I can showcase it. But you can change directions at the very end if you wish. You don't have to go into one direction. You can, at the very last second, you can either let go early as well to get a slightly reduced range of the flash, or you can spin it back the other way if you decide that you don't want to go straight first into the enemy team. Alright, what we'll do here now is we'll delete all the minions and we'll put all our cooldowns back up, off even, and then we'll teleport back to base. So what we're going to be talking about here now is items on Blitzcrank. So as you can already see, we've got a cookie coming through from one of our runes. So while we're still kind of on the subject of runes, cookies will come in. You'll get 3 of them. One thing that people don't realize that is kind of a noob trap is if you read the biscuit, so you get health and mana over time, but on the rune you actually get permanent mana. Doesn't say it on this cookie for some reason, but you actually get permanent mana. So if you are, say, finished a laning phase or coming out of the laning phase and you are hesitant about selling cookies in your base, if you actually sell them, you'll still get the permanent mana that you would get from your runes. So if we look here, maybe it says in the runes, yes, consuming or selling a biscuit permanently increases your mana cap by 50. So if you were to vendor it, you get 30 gold and you still get plus 50 base mana. So that's very important to know. It could help you get towards a control ward, could help you getting into completing a core part of your item build. But generally, if you're not using cookies for the laning phase, then you need to offload them at the shop and get the extra income in. Now, talking about items, always start still shoulder guards first. The attack damage works really well on Blitzcrank on his E, as it does double damage. The fist knockup, which we'll talk about a little bit more as the video goes on, but the physical damage is very important for the very early part of the laning phase because of the double damage part of that. Some people might think that the AP might be better, as there are AP values on the Q and the ultimate. I would argue that it would probably be even, maybe marginally better AP wise if it was level 6 plus, but because Blitzcrank really needs to snowball as much as possible, E is better. Also, it can help you push in the lane a little bit quicker as you'll have higher auto attack damage. Let me just cut out this music here, a bit too dramatic. Right, boots is one of the first things that you'd be looking at because you'd be looking for plays throughout the entire game of Blitzcrank. Moby boots is a very core favorite for most people. But also you have a cheaper option, save 100 gold, boots of swiftness, and also the secondary here, also movement slowing effects are reduced by 25%. This affects on your overdrive. I'll talk about it a little bit now. You get a little movement speed boost from your W. At the end of the duration, you'll actually be slowed, and these boots reduce that effect slightly. Which can make the difference sometimes. Also, the base movement speed is much higher than the Moby boots when in combat. Obviously, when you're looking to roam, Moby boots of mobility are better overall when you're moving from lane to lane. But when you're actually in combat, boots of swiftness comes out top every time. So with the extra slowing effects reduction on one of your abilities as well, it kind of makes it a favorite of mine, really. And you're saving 100 gold, so I think boots of swiftness is generally much better, unless you are literally just running around the map 90% of the game, then maybe boots of mobility are better. But for fights and even for looking for engages, boots of swiftness is a very good item to take. So boots of swiftness. Early here, Glacial Shroud is really good. Gives you some armor, gives you some mana, which works off your passive, which we'll talk about more later. Plus, Blitzcrank has some very high mana costs. You have to use your spells sparingly early until you do pick up mana. So Glacial Shroud definitely helps you out in the laning phase quite a bit. So Glacial Shroud to start off with. Now you have two options here. You could decide to buy the Zeeks, or you can actually buy this Kindle Gem. So buying the Kindle Gem increases your effective health by a decent amount against armor targets. Not specifically because the Kindle Gem doesn't have any armor resistance on, but you're buffing up your health and you've already picked up armor from the Glacial Shroud. So against AD targets, so usually most junglers are attack damage and most AD carries are attack damage. So if you're coming up against those two combinations, you'll survive a little bit longer by taking these two items, and you'll have an extra 10% cooldown reduction. If you're up against like an AP jungler, like an Elise or a Fiddlesticks, then I would already start looking towards the Zeeks, as this has magic resistance that you will need. And then Zeeks gives you, the effect on Zeeks is that you need to use this on an ally that's near you when you use your ultimate. So it procs off when you use your ultimate, but you have to have your teammate nearby in order for this to work. And then you then get a glacial aura around you, which then slows people down in your melee range. So that can be pretty good in terms of if you grab someone and knock them up, and then they get the slowing aura around, you get the slowing aura around yourself when you use your ultimate, and then it keeps them in your range, and it stops them from getting away as easily. It's a pretty standard Blitzcrank combo, which we'll talk about later. And so there's a lot of interactions here with spells and abilities, so do look at down below. We'll have timestamps for each bit, so you may want to go backwards and forwards here a little bit. So once you've completed your Zeeks, you'll then be looking towards to either finish off your Knight's Vow or start building your Knight's Vow. So you'll be going into Kindle Gem and then Knight's Vow, and then once again you need to apply this to either your AD carry or someone on your team who's an assassin that's doing particularly well in the game. That way you'll be able to keep them alive a little bit more, and they'll be able to keep you a little bit alive a little bit longer. So generally it's your AD carry, especially if you bought this still and it's still laning phase somehow after all of this. But if you're assassins like your mid laner, Katarina or something like that, or your jungler's an assassin doing particularly well, then Knight's Vow will benefit them quite a bit too. Don't feel like you always have to apply this to your AD carry. Same with the Zeeks as well. Really the Zeeks is only there so that you have to keep applying it to different people when your ulti's ready. Blitzcrank's ult matches, well, it doesn't quite match, it's actually quicker than the cooldown on Zeeks in some circumstances. So you will be looking for different allies depending on who you're standing with in order to make sure you get that slowing aura. And the damage effect from the auto attacks from the Zeeks portion to your ally is really minor. So the most important thing from that is the slowing aura. So those two items are pretty key. If you find out that you're the only tank on your team and your rest of your team's particularly squishy, you could always look for a Gargoyle Stoneplate. If you're looking for this particular item, Gargoyle Stoneplate, then you may look to buy it outright first. You could also pick up a Glacial Shroud first and then go into Gargoyle Stoneplate. The Gargoyle Stoneplate is makes you incredibly tanky for very little cost. You have to proc it and then you get bonus HP, 40% HP, but all your damage is reduced by 60%. But Blitzcrank, what you could do is you could do your initial engage, then pop Stoneplate, and you can just run around and do boop people. But you won't lose too much damage because Blitzcrank doesn't do too much damage, particularly after the laning phase anyway. So it can make you particularly tanky. Plus, if you're near 3 enemies, if you find yourself right in the middle of a team fight, you're going to get an extra 40 bonus armor and magic resistance. So if you are the only tank on your team, or seemingly like a tank on your team, then Stoneplate, first completed item, is totally a valid option, and then you pick up those other 2 pieces that I mentioned. If you're not the only tank on your team, then what you can probably still do is still go Stoneplate third item if the game's still going on. On the item progression on this, stopwatch is a very powerful tool. You can, if you're getting low HP and the enemy is focusing you for some reason instead of your teammates, you can pop this stasis and then buy your team a few seconds and maybe waste the enemy's time a little bit in order for something good to happen. But yeah, Stoneplate's a really good item overall. If you feel like you've got a lot of magic damage on your team, Abyssal Mask is actually quite a nice item, but not often picked up. It is quite expensive at 3,000, 500 more than a stone plate, like 750 gold more than a Zeke's, but it will provide your team with an extra 15% magic damage when you're standing near the enemy. So you see that little circle around me right now when you hover over Abyssal Mask? It shows the range of where that debuff will be applied. So you have to be quite near them. So if you do, it will affect your own spells, but if you've got an AP heavy team, then it's likely that the enemy team are going to be picking up a lot of magic resistance, so that can help nullify this a little bit. But as I said, it's really expensive, but all the stats for Blitzcrank work really well. Also bear in mind kind of two conditions here, that your team has a lot of ability power, magic damage dealers on your team, and the enemy does as well, because this item has no armor. It has decent amount of health, decent amount of mana, 10% cooldown reduction is really nice, but it has no armor resistance. So it's not ideal to pick this up if you're against a team full of attack damage. Otherwise you will be quite squishy. All you'll be doing is really buffing your team's damage out slightly, but you will be making yourself particularly squishy, especially if you are the only tank on your team. Other noteworthy options here, Frozen Heart's quite good against an auto-attacking team, like I mentioned earlier, how you probably wouldn't want to pick an Abyssal Mask into. Frozen Heart does a really good job against a lot of auto-attacking champions. Say, for example, enemy has an AD carry and an AD carry in the top lane or in the jungle, like a Kindred or a Twitch. Then you can start looking towards Frozen Heart. A ridiculous amount of cooldown reduction and armor on this item, and mana, which gives you more effective life through your passive, which I'll talk about later. So it doesn't really matter that this item doesn't have any health. Very cheap path as well, leading up to the Frozen Heart, like Glacier Shroud, as we talked about, is a really good item. For an extra 1,000 you get Warden's Mail, which is a decent item against those auto attackers, and then you can complete into Frozen Heart. Another item as well, which is valid, there's two more items I want to talk about before we move on. Definitely don't recommend Iceborne Gauntlet, by the way. But some other item options are, you have Bramble Vest. So if you are coming against a lot of champions that are healing, I wouldn't advise completing into Thormail for quite some time, but just picking up the Bramble Vest will make it so that if they auto attack you, they get a Grievous Wounds debuff from auto attacking you, which is a 40% reduction in healing. So like lifesteal items like Bloodthirster, or any method or way of self-healing that they have, it will reduce it by a considerable amount. So if you are noticing a couple of people on the enemy team picking up like a Death Dance or Bloodthirsters, or just champions that have natural high healing, Bramble Vest can help your team mitigate some of that healing a little bit. Just bear in mind, Grievous Wounds debuffs don't stack, so other items that apply Grievous Wounds are Executioners, which your AD carry might have already. You have Morellonomicon as well for APs, which are quite expensive. Morellonomicon is the most expensive Grievous Wounds item in the entire game. So, if your team is struggling or just refusing to pick up Grievous Wounds anyway, then make sure you pick up a Bramble Vest. It's quite cheap. It's only cost 1,000 gold overall. A little bit of armor there as well. Overall, it's like one of the worst in terms of like stat bonuses per gold for you, but for the Grievous Wounds, sometimes it can just be more important for that. And finally, we can talk about Righteous Glory. Now, Righteous Glory is one of these items where it is ridiculously expensive for a support to buy, but if you are doing really, really, really well, you can go Righteous Glory first item. Stats on it are very tanky, cooldown reduction. Only thing it's missing is magic resistance, which a lot of these tank items generally miss. But when you pop it, when running towards an enemy, you're going to get a lot of movement speed. And then when you grab them, if you're able to grab them while you still got Righteous Glory active, then as soon as they land onto you, they'll get slowed by 75%. So it can be a massive catch out tool, but it is incredibly expensive. And the build path isn't too bad until completion. The hardest part about this item is Glacier Shroud is a great item, as we talked about. Bracer is okay, it's only 650, but overall the stats aren't that great. It's the combined cost that gets you at 1,100 gold, and waiting for 1,100 gold sometimes is really painful. Whereas a lot of these other combined costs on the other items are much more generous. So combined cost here 250, and then Knight's Vow is 600, I believe. Yeah, 600 gold on combination. So that's the big difference and the big waiting time you have to actually complete that item. Which, if you're doing well in lane already, you probably have like these two items already. The Glacial Shroud, well, Glacial Shroud you'd probably be picking up anyway, and you probably snuck in this Crystalline Bracer. But then what can happen is, because you're getting too far away from getting the Zeeks, you can then just be like not getting any kills. No play, map goes quiet, and then just waiting. What you can do if you decide to diverge off Righteous Glory is you can still go Zeeks, and then you could make this into a Shreddiers, or you could make it into a Redemption. Shreddiers is probably the slightly better option, but overall for Blitzcrank it's not an amazing item compared to Righteous Glory, but it can be okay still in catching out. Redemption is suboptimal on Blitzcrank, to say the least. You won't get that much benefit from that item. Hopefully that helps you clear up on the items front if you were confused about what tank items to buy in particular. The general rule here is this kind of the same across most of the tanks. So if you get used to playing Blitzcrank with the item builds that I mentioned, you better take that over to something like Leona or Brom quite easily. Even the other hook champions like Thresh and Nautilus as well kind of have the same item build path as that, so you can get the kind of like the gist and the idea of what kind of items tank supports generally take in solo queue games. Then we're going to be covering the spells. Good job for holding on until this point. So let me spawn some dummies. We'll spawn a couple of dummies here. So Blitzcrank's abilities overall are very basic and is a very easy champion to play and understand how to play against. So he's a very good starter champion. Almost said starter Pokemon there. Starter champion for you to play League with if you're wanting to get into the tank support role. So his passive it has a 90-second cooldown, so a relatively long cooldown, but if you fall below 30% health, gets a mana shield equivalent to 30% of his total maximum mana, and it lasts up to 10 seconds. So as you can imagine on the items that we're talking about, like Glacial Shroud, having mana increases your health, technically. Not directly your health pool, but as soon as you dip under 30%, you'll get a bigger shield from the more max mana you have. So you can see why mana now on Blitzcrank is not only good because his spells are very expensive, Q on the grab being at 100 base when he doesn't have much mana to start off with in the game. So you can see how mana on Blitzcrank is basically win-win. So it's a nice little extra health. It can also catch out a lot of people. There's been plenty of cases where people think they finished off Blitzcrank, but then suddenly the shield pops up. It's happened a couple of times with things like executes like Darius ulti and Karthus ults. So people get caught out a little bit by that. And you get a debuff tracker as well, so you can pay attention to when it's about to come back off cooldown. So Blitzcrank's main ability that you'll be world famous for is his hook. He's actually got the longest hook in the entire game, so it's longer than Thresh's and Blitzcrank's, Thresh's and Nautilus. This hook is longer than both of theirs, so it's the longest hook in the entire game. And it's just a standard grab, so it will only grab one target. It doesn't go through units. So if we grab this one, it will always grab the first target. It can be a champion, it can be a minion. So what you would find often later on into the game is that the tanks should be looking to try and block this. So you're going to have to start getting quite cunning and trying to find flanks and ways to grab people without making it so that you haven't got their beefiest tanks suddenly into the middle of your team. So once you do your hook, I'll talk about the E next. So we're going from Q to E. We'll talk about W in a second. So E is Blitzcrank's knock up. So as soon as you grab, you knock up. You can knock up them with your next auto attack with E. E is an auto attack reset. So what that means is when you press the ability, you're going to do an instant auto attack. So ideally when you're catching people off in lane, say you've done the play and you've done the knock up, when you're running around trying to figure out things to do, usually your maximum DPS is doing auto attack then E. Auto attack then E. Well, you won't be able to do it as much often as that because E cooldown is quite long, but you should always, even if your E is ready, you should always try and save it so that your auto attack then E like that instantly. Another thing I mentioned briefly about the E when we were at the shop is that it does double damage on your attack damage, so your physical damage. You won't be building AD on Blitzcrank, but it will be on your starter item on your steel shoulder guards. So 3 attack damage then scales into 6. If you have picked up adaptive force, this number will be higher as well. Adaptive force Blitzcrank, if you have steel shoulder guards, it will then be converted into extra attack damage. So you're looking to do more damage in the laning phase. So if you are wanting to squeeze out more DPS very early on, instead of picking up the cooldown reduction rune and a resistance rune, this will help you do a lot more DPS at the very start of the game. This doesn't scale very great because you're not picking up attack damage, but it's very good early in the game. Your W is your movement speed, and it gives you attack speed, but that's not the main reason why you're looking at this. This is your main engage tool. So if you found someone out of position, you W in, speeding in, hooking, and then knocking up. That is your basic combo, and really your only combo really as Blitzcrank. We can talk about some minor advanced things later, but that's what you'll be doing 99% of your time in your league games. Speeding up, hooking, knocking up, and then just punching people after that. So, you may have been noticing some lightning strikes happening onto the enemy. That's your ultimate. Your ultimate has 2 components. So, when you auto attack, you see the little dial that goes around on the ground. When that completes, which it always will after hitting someone, they will then get zapped by your passive. If your ultimate's on cooldown, it won't do the zap for the bonus damage. So this is quite good DPS on fight. If you're able to hold onto your ultimate, which honestly is really unlikely in team fights straight after the initial engage. If you're able to though, your DPS on a single target will go up by quite a decent amount. So yes, it's okay. What you can do also is if you boop multiple targets. Did that wrong. You can, it doesn't have like a cooldown specific for each target, and it registers up to 3 stacks. So if you have some weird attack speed build going, you can actually have 3 stacks of this. So if we do auto, so if I showcase it by trying to get 3 auto attacks off and then flashing away, it should do 3 zaps. Let's give it a go. So you see how they still got zapped 2 more times. So if you somehow got enough attack speed, the DPS does, it is there, but you'll be using your active quite early on usually. So Blitzcrank's active is an AoE around himself. It does a decent amount of damage, particularly early on. It will also silence them for 0.75 seconds. Which isn't a lot, but it's enough to interrupt channels like Katarina ulti or Malzahar ult, something like that. It does a really good job at interrupting them. Sometimes also it can mess up people's spell rotations. People get so ingrained in what they're doing just naturally that a 0.75 seconds silence can mess people up a little bit. Also, a recent change onto this as well is that it now also destroys shields. So if you're playing against a Sona or a Janna, you can wait until they then do their shield or their heal, and wait for that shield to then appear, and then you get more damage value from them popping off the shield and then carrying on what you're doing. That's like the only cases where you'd want to save your ultimate Blitzcrank is popping off shields, like a big chunky shield, or you're looking to use your ultimate to interrupt very dangerous channel an ability that nobody else on your team can look to interrupt. So those are the only cases why you would still have your ultimate up and need the extra passive zap damage in the team fight itself. So basic combo, in laning phase, you're zooming in, you're grabbing, knock up, AoE with your ultimate, and then you ignite them, and then you're smacking their face after that. That's really what you're doing. And in a team fight, once you've made that pick, you're then zooming in as well, and there's trying to be annoying on their squishier targets, or trying to peel off your AD carry, just trying to do as many power fists as you can with your E ability to knock them up and just generally be annoying until your team's dead or the enemy team's dead. That is the whole. There's not much to him. It's not too much to learn, but hopefully this guide kind of covers what you're looking to do a lot of the time. Another couple of tricks that you can do at level 1, what people like to do is a lot of level 1 invades on Blitzcrank. So if you are starting red side and you come into the river here, what you can do is you can put a ward over this wall and then kind of wait around. Ideally have like one teammate here to make sure that they're not invading, and then you're in this pit by yourself, then it can be pretty bad. But you can wait here. So what some people usually do is pull for the jungler, and then they usually go the quickest route back from this buff back into bot lane is going through this brush. This blast cone won't have spawned, neither of this dragon would have. It's because we're 20 minutes in the game. But when they come through here, you then look for that hook. You probably won't get a kill in this situation. Hopefully your AD carries in the pit as well. But you'll force their flash, and it will incredibly help you in the very start of that laning phase. The AD carry or their support not having flash for the first 5 minutes of laning phase is huge, believe me. So that is a great tool. Another cheesy thing that you can do level 1, just chill out and then brush. Wait until they come across. Hook, pow, pow, pow. Then maybe look to move away. Quite nice, really. So now we'll talk about what champions you'd want to play Blitzcrank with, and what champions are kind of annoying to play against and with. So when you're looking to play Blitzcrank in ranked, in draft, you don't want to pick him early. Blitzcrank has a lot of counter picks. So for example, you don't really want to be picking Blitzcrank into a tank, because otherwise you'll just be grabbing a tank most of the laning phase, and usually like putting a Leona, for example, towards you so that she's closer towards your AD carry is usually a problem. So not recommended. Playing Blitzcrank against an Ezreal or a Tristana can be difficult against mechanical skilled individuals, as you can Arcane Shift. Ezreal's Arcane Shift and Tristana's Rocket Jump can actually cancel your hook. So even though if you land it on them, they can actually cancel it with their abilities. Another AD carry which can be a problem as well is Sivir. Against Sivir, you can try and run into her face and start off with your ultimate, then do your abilities to try and remove the spell shield as a factor, but it's pretty difficult to do. Just generally avoid playing Blitzcrank into Sivir anyway. Supports that can be pretty annoying. We've already established tanks, so you don't really want to be playing Blitzcrank into Leona or like Braum or Alistair. But another one would be Morgana. Black Shield can pose an issue a lot to some new players into the game, as if you hook someone with a Black Shield, your hook won't do anything. It will do damage to the shield, but it won't actually grab the enemy towards you. Champions that you want to be playing Blitzcrank into is basically most of the enchanters. Very squishy, easy to kill as quickly as possible. Mages like Lux on the bot lane can be easy options. Some tricky ones are Zyra. Zyra can be an issue because plants can block your hook. So you can grab, minions as well as champions. So plants count as a minion, and those plants can potentially stop you from making a play there. Just something to think about there if you're going into that matchup. AD carries you want to be playing with a Blitzcrank are for sure someone with like hard engage, very early power, like a Lucian, a Draven, Callista. Those champions do very well early and do a lot of damage early, and some of them don't do very well late game. So those champions, basically looking for AD carry champions that snowball a lot in the early stages and generally suck later on. Hyper carries like Vayne are a no-no because she doesn't do very much damage early and she kind of needs help getting to that stage. I'm not saying it's impossible to play with a Vayne, for example, but it would make your life a lot easier if you were to stick something with something like a Lucian or a Draven. I hope this Blitzcrank guide helps you out. If you are interested in finding out about any of the other support guides I've made, be sure to subscribe, have a look at the list, and if you have any questions, I'm streaming every single day on twitch.tv/Bizzleberry, where you can ask me any questions you like about your support champions and I can try and push you in the direction of where you want to go. I'm very fortunate to have a very lovely community that also help out other people in need as well when I'm not online. That's also on the Discord as well, so discord.gg/Bizzleberry if you want continued support advice when I'm not online. We've got a lot of people there. We've got over 2,500 berries there at the moment, so feel free to join in the community. We're not just playing League as well, we're playing other stuff like World of Warcraft and Battle Royales and all sorts of stuff going on there, so feel free to join the community as well. And so yeah, stay tuned, and more support guide content, tier lists, gameplay videos, etc. coming soon. Take care.